Finally back with my Empyria lecture series. We now come to, finally, Book 5 of the Legendary Scrolls. And this book is the Book of Nettza. Well, I would say the author of the book, but I'm actually going to wait until I get to that point in the book itself. So, we're just going to start with this. So, as always, the timeline here, you can see we have the Shadowfall from Book 2. So just a brief recap, actually. Right here we have Book 1, the account of Arcane's creation, with the creation of the universe of Empyria at the very start. Then it's followed by the Primitus Age, meaning the age of the world when there was no death. There was no death. And then death entered the universe through the Shadowfall in the year 2580 AC, meaning after creation. Then right here, with the death of King Rakaza of Volterra, he officially marked the end of the Primitus Age. In the year 3024 AC, Spectrus wrote the workings of Sintha. He compiled the writings too. And Atheon also around this time, around the same time of writing the workings of Sintha, Book 3 of the Scrolls, he had also, around that same time, compiled the Book of Libus and the Scrolls of Celtex, who lived during the Primitus Age and had recorded the Primitus Age itself. He compiled their two writings into the Book of Primitus. Alright? Now, following that, we have the Age of Peace, which is not recorded, and there are no events recorded in the Age of Peace, except about 100 years before the Great War begins. In Book 4, there is a book called the Book of Elysial that was written about a century before the events of Book 4, the account of Infernos, the previous video in this series. So about a century before the account of Infernos, the Book of Elysial was written, but that's not really part of the main scrolls, so it wasn't included in the canon of the Legendary Scrolls. Instead, it was confined to the Lost Scrolls, which I might talk about later, but they're not really relevant to the universe as a whole. So, now we pick off with Book 5, which is covering about 5 years of history, technically, but we'll get into that. The Book of Nettza covers about 4490 AC to 4495 AC, about the time that the events take place. So this is where we are starting from now, in the grand scheme of things. It looks like we're about halfway done. Trust me, we're not. So, Book 5, the Book of Nettza, opens with the writer saying, this is the account of the battles which took place during the Great War, the battles between the Volterran and Nettza armies. So, at the very start, we get the sense that this is an account specifically of two kingdoms and the battles they had with each other. And then, following that first sentence, the rest of the introduction to the book is actually a royal genealogy of the kings of Volterra. So it says, these were the kings of Volterra who came after Rakaza. And remember Rakaza, let's see, we have here Auden, Canis, Draxivan, Artherax. This is the year he was born. This is the year they were born. These are the years that they die. And this is their age at the time that they die. Their age of death. Then we have Artherax, we have Erolad, Goa, Zerafox, who founded the kingdom of Volterra. In fact, he was the person who invented the idea of a kingdom. He was the first king ever. And then Akenna, Relaborn, and Rakaza. And Rakaza, when he died in 2832, that marked the official end of the Primitus Age. And so, these were the kings that came after Rakaza. King Celestine, King Marhevion, King Salazil, King Marhevion, King Delius. Now, Marhevion actually had an older brother named Malak, spelled Maluk, but Malak actually died of a sickness shortly before he could have taken the throne. And so Marhevion, the younger brother, he survived, and he became the king instead of Malak. Thelius, Thaxar. Now Thaxar, if you remember from Book 3 in the beginning of the video, King Thaxar is the king who reigned over Ultira at the time of Atheon, and Spectrus wrote about it in the Workings of Sintha. So that's where Thaxar is in the genealogy. Then King Getharin, King Palionus, King Celestine. Now, King Celestine here is where we reach a little break in the genealogy at the start of this book. And this will be a long video, as you probably already have seen. But there's a lot to get through. I didn't feel like breaking the Book of Nettza up into different parts like I did with Book 2, the Book of Primitus, because it doesn't really work that way. There aren't clear, distinguished arcs in the story. It only fits as one cohesive story. Okay, so here's what the writer of Book 5, which again, you will discover his name later. This is what he writes after reaching King Celestine in the genealogy. And it came to pass, one night, as Celestine fell into a deep slumber, that he was given a vision from Amnia. Toniel appeared before Celestine in his dream and said, "Child of man, heed my words, for they are just and true. From your line will come forth the dawn star, which will shine forth and prevail against the darkness. And the light will eclipse its shadows. The star is a child, and he will be of your blood. The child who will bring balance to the worlds will come from the family of Frasier. Henceforth, this shall be your new name. Write this down as the sun rises in the morning, for this prophecy is true." Then, when Celestine awoke the next morning, he wrote down the things which he heard in his dream. Celestine gave himself the surname Frasier, so that his offspring would begin the Frasier family. Now, a little tidbit is Frasier is actually my last name. So I got the surname for the prophesied child in this universe from my own last name, which I got from my father, obviously. Because, well, I can't get into it now, but the movies that take place way after the whole Legendary Scrolls are over, the way I made up the movies before I made them into a fantasy world, came from first-person daydreams, so that's a little hint as to why my last name is in it. So there we have it. We have Celestine as the first king of Ultira who receives the prophecy from Toniel. And the prophecy is, as I read, a prophecy of a child who will be called the Dawn Star, and the Dawn Star will prevail against the darkness. Now, we're going to leave the prophecy there for now, but the prophecy is very, very important for the entire universe. So, after Celestine, the text continues with the following kings. So, King Azinu, King Eltaset, King Bravis, King Antion, King Hesk, King Jafal, King Venustar, King Unicorn, King Arcelox. We'll talk about him briefly in Book 6, but that's a while from now. And Book 6, trust me, will definitely be many different parts. It's one book with 14 chapters in it, so we can split that up. So after King Arcelox, King Illisun, and then King Markuzefek, he's also pretty important. King Talus, King Irophane, King Kellen, and then Alfortia and Khazar. Now notice, Alfortia and Khazar comes next in the line of the kings of Ultira, and Alfortia and Khazar. Notice no surname of Frasier, so he's not Kellen's son, okay? But Holly is Kellen's daughter. But Alfortia married Holly, so he became part of the royal family. Now, how does this work with the prophecy being prophesied to be from the father's line, from Celestine? Well, we'll find out eventually. But for now, continuing. So, this is from the Book of Nettza now. And Helena bore Holly Fraser. Helena is Kellen's wife. Helena bore Holly Fraser. Now Holly fell in love with a man named Alfortia Ankazar, and they married. So Alfortia became the next king of Ultira. Alfortia would be called by his surname, for he took pride in his family name, meaning he goes by his last name, Ankazar. You will never see him being referred to as Alfortia in the Book of Nettza or any time after the Book of Nettza when he's referenced. So he took pride in his family surname and henceforth went by Ankazar. For his father and mother, Seisthenes and Milvana, were loyal servants of the royal family in the palace. Now, the Great War, caused by the stirring of tensions between peoples because of Infernos, which was let loose by Rechius the Precursor, had been going on for 10 years. So, the narrative of the battles between Ultira and Nettza begins officially with a reintroduction to the Great War, which we learned how it started in the end of the previous book, the account of Infernos. The Great War is an accumulation of constant wars and battles between nations across all the worlds for seemingly no greater purpose, but behind the scenes it's because Infernos has been let loose into the worlds, and spiritually speaking is influencing all the nations to seek destruction without cause. That is the Great War. And Alfortia Ankazar, as you can see, he was born in 4382, and then up to 4588 is when he died. But then at 4480 AC, before he died, obviously, is when the Great War begins. And then 10 years later, around 4490 AC, is when the events of this book officially begin. Hence why the timeline shows 45, if you can see, 4490 AC. Okay. So, 10 years pass since the Great War officially began, and now the events of this book, sorry if that was loud, I got a new headset, I hope it's good quality. 10 years have now officially passed since the Great War officially began, with Infernos starting his work in the worlds, or its work, and now, 10 years later, this book begins. Now, okay, I already read this, but here's the quote of the prophecy one more time. Child of man, heed my words, for they are just and true. The Dawn Star. The Dawn Star, this, from now on, all the time, the Dawn Star and the prophecy are closely related. Anytime you see the Dawn Star mentioned, that's the prophesied chosen one, you could say. Alright. So, Kellen begot Holly Fraser, yet could have no son. Okay, this is a quote from Book 11, much, much farther along, because it needs to be explained why, if the prophecy of the Dawn Star says that the Dawn Star would be of the blood of the father, Celestine, and yet through his line, it breaks, you could say, because Alfortia Ankazar marries into the family, marries their daughter, so you would say the blood of the fathers is broken. Well, Thyreus, who wrote the Book 11, Legends of Orion, wrote this concerning that. Kellen begot Holly Fraser, so Kellen is the father of the prophetic bloodline, and Holly technically is, but she's not a father, she's not a man, so she can't carry that, according to the prophecy. But she couldn't have a son to carry on that line. So that's why it's broken there. But because of this, Toniel carried over the spiritual seed of the promised child from Kellen and transferred it to Holly's husband, Alfortia Ankazar, who became the next king of Ultira. So when Holly gave birth to their son, his blood was only that of his mother's, and maintained the spiritual seed from the Fraser bloodline. So that is the in-universe explanation for that. Alright. Now, we're going to look at the Kingdom of Ultira. This is a rough sketch I made 5 years ago now. That's crazy. And it's a rough outline sketch of the layout of the kingdom, the city of Ultira. But I never finished it because I realized I couldn't. I'm not skilled enough. And it's just very, very bare bones, so you get a general outline of the format of the city. Not the appearance and not the scale, but the layout of the city. So I might come back to this if I need to in the future, in this video for the Book of Nettza. Maybe even for book 6 and 7 actually, and 8. Actually, books 5 through 8, I might need it a lot. We have the North Gate here, very big gate. It's a very big city, okay? There's North Gate, West Gate, East Gate, South Gate. And each gate has one huge highway road that leads toward the palace, which is in the center of the city. And the palace tower, the tower of the palace, which is represented by this little dot here, reaches up to the clouds. That's how big the palace is. And there's these other quarters around the palace that are part of the palace that have outdoor quarters, gardens, beautiful places, all that kind of stuff. And there's other mini towers on these 4 things here. And here there's like a little balcony that overlooks from the entrance, the front entrance that looks toward the south. There's a balcony that looks over the big entry doors to the palace that lead right into the throne room in here. And then behind the throne room, there's a lot of other rooms, and there's big chambers and the stairways that go up to the tower, where there's other royal chambers and all that kind of stuff. Here we have the aerodrome, aero meaning wind, and drome, so its shape and its building structure. The aerodrome is a big stadium-shaped structure that's built for airships to land in. So think of it like a medieval fantasy airport, basically. But it looks nothing like an airport. It's designed for airships. Okay, that's all you need to know. And this is the high living quadrant, or quarters you could call them, where all the middle class to high class people who are well off, are living here. The middle class living quadrant, it's in our world standards we call this poor, but in this world at this time, they call it middle class. And then here we have where these two would go here. People who live here come here for shopping, for necessities and stuff, and this quarter will come in from here. And then in the center of this big quadrant here, which is the business quadrant technically, is the Empyrian Council Hall, which we will get into much later. And then you can see here there's towers here and forts, and these were actually built around the time the Great War first began, for the purpose of defense, because before that there were never any wars. So there was never a single battle in any world in this universe until Infernos impacted the worlds and began the Great War. So the Great War is the first war. But it's not really a war, it's wars. And then this quadrant is kind of like the military. It's technically not 100% finished at the time of this book starting. But moving on. So here we go. We got some reading to do. So here we go. So the word. Okay, I'm just going to start right after where I left off, actually. So King Enkazar held the throne at this time. As soon as he took the throne, he began to prepare for the coming battles that he knew were approaching ever since the kingdom had heard of the terror of Infernos. So, the beast, as they call Infernos, the people in the world living during the Great War call it the beast, for reasons I will get into at some point. Then the word went out through all of Empyria that the king was building a larger army. Soldiers from the palace patrolled the streets and plazas, and they posted sealed papers on the walls of inns and taverns. The people would read the letters, and, even seeing the seal of the king, would reject the order. And people are all like, they're not willing to fight, they don't even know what that means, No context in their lifestyle for that kind of stuff. So King Enkazar called his soldiers to the throne room and said to them, "We haven't a need for meaningless letters. Take them by force. We need an army. Or do the people not understand that if we were attacked, our city might crumble? Go and arrest the men of the city, weak and strong, young and old, and bring them to my quarters." The soldiers did as they were told. And I tried generating an image here with stable diffusion, depicting kind of what this might look like, but it's not accurate. First of all, these are not the kind of buildings of Empyria, how Empyria looks. Empyria is more like silver not concrete, but like silver bricks and royal blue and light blue roofs and pillars and marble streets. Well, not marble streets, but I don't know the names of materials for I'm not an architect person. I don't know material names, but it looks like the texture of marble. It's not marble though, but it has more of the consistency of like brick and not asphalt, but it's like medieval asphalt that looks marble textured. I don't know how to explain it. I'd have to draw it, but I can't. So Ultira looks way more fancy and regal. That's the word I should use. Regal. Ultira is more regal than this. It's not like the typical tavern stuff. And also the Ultiran soldiers wouldn't be wearing this stuff. The national colors of Ultira on their flag too, and all the royalty wear the same color palette in their armor and everything, and capes. The Ultiran colors are royal blue, gold, and silver. So just picture royal blue, gold, silver together. That's the color palette of Ultiran royalty. So eventually, King Ankazar builds his army. Okay, he brings the men before him that he had the soldiers bring up to the palace, and he says to them, "I have deemed all you men to be fit for battle. From this night onward, you will be trained under General Near and the military outposts that lie on the edges of the wall of the city. Do not," he says, "do not get comfortable in your training, for if there arises the need for troops, or if there be an ambush, you must all fight." The men obeyed the king, and none of them mumbled under their breath or complained. King Ankazar sent them off to the training outpost that same night, and the men worked tirelessly, having no rest. And so, from there, it's summarized basically that they trained a lot, they don't rest a lot, but Ankazar gives them just enough food and meals to keep them going. So, now the Ultiran army was large, and Ultira was the greatest military power in all the lands. But while the kingdom of Ultira grew, there is yet another kingdom growing as well. A kingdom from another world, meaning not the planet not Earth, not the planet Ardon, where Ultira is. This kingdom was the capital of the Rift Plain Enox, the kingdom of Nettza. And Nettza was under the reign of King Nettzash, the builder and founder of the kingdom. Okay, so here's you could say, our antagonist of this book. So we have Ultira, ruled over at this time by King Ankazar, and then we have the kingdom of Nettza, ruled over by King Nettzash. Ultira on Ardon, the planet Ardon, and Nettza on the Rift Plain Enox. Again, not a planet. King Nettzash, a distant descendant of Enox, whom the Rift Plain was named after, was esteemed as the ruler of Enox because of his bloodline. Meaning not just Nettza, but he was esteemed originally as the ruler of the Rift Plain itself, the whole world. After Nettzash built and established his kingdom, it became the main point of the population of the entire Rift Plain, a center for different cultures and a hub for sojourners. What this means is basically, as it sounds, King Nettash's kingdom that he established, Nettza, it became, for the Rift Plain Enox, for that world, where most of the population was centered. So if you go outside of if you were to go outside of Nettza at this time in history, aside from like certain pinpointed cities and towns, there isn't as much population. And a lot of different cultures so there's the city of Genshir, which is an elven city, huge elven city, just across the river from Nettza at this time. So they brought their culture into the city, and it's a hub for sojourners, which means people who go on journeys. You could call sojourners journeyers. I didn't make that word up. That's why I'm still defining it, in case you don't know. So now we have an account here of why does King Nettzash of the Kingdom of Nettza on a different world from Ardon, where Ultira is, how do these two kingdoms get into battles with each other? So it's very unique thing that happens here, and I'll explain it soon. But keep in mind, if you don't remember how Rift Planes work somehow, hopefully you're watching these in the right order and not too far apart from each other. So hopefully you still remember how Rift Planes work and how the sky of a Rift Plane works. But in case you don't remember, please go back to Book 2 and Book 1 where I talk about rift planes, especially book 1 with the creation, and I show my drawing of how a rift plane works scientifically. They're the layout of a rift plane. But for a short debriefing, that's not the right word. For a short recap, a rift plane sky, it lights up during the day. There's no sun or moon or objects in the sky. It's just plain sky. And then at nighttime, the whole sky goes darker. And when it goes darker, the sky of every rift plane is technically one giant rift portal. And when the rift portal is darkened and it doesn't have its gold energy that makes the sky look bright and blue, then it's just the portal there, and it's not light up, so you see through the portal into a random part of space, and Ovissa, which is the space where the Earth is and the sun, the moon, and stars are. Rift planes are in a pocket dimension, which are contained in portals of light that hang like stars in a different space called Arvesta, which is like outside and around the space where the Earth is, the planet, at this time in the universe's history. So that's a brief recap, but again, it's better to go back if you really don't remember. So this will help explain how this happens. So one night, while King Nettza was lying in his bed, again, stable diffusion, Nettza didn't look like this. He wasn't blonde, but I don't really care too much about the accuracy at this point. These are just to get the images across. One night, while King Nettza was lying in his bed, he heard the wind rushing between the curtains of his window. As he walked to his balcony, he looked to the sky above, and he saw Ardon among the stars. And he said to himself, "The earth hangs in the sky tonight, but why has this rarest of signs appeared before me? Could it be a sign from Toniel? I shall make that world mine, and my name and kingdom will prosper." So what he's saying is, and to explain this, again, a sky of a rift plane looks into any random part of space, the space of Ovissa, where the earth is, but it would be incredibly, almost 0.0001% chance that any night within 1 decade, you would get to see the Earth in the sky. You'd usually just see stars. You would never really see this. Well, you'd never see the sun or the moon with stars randomly. But that night, he saw Ardon in the sky. So he took that as a sign from Toniel, from a precursor. So King Nettza set forth to multiply the strength of his army, for word had gone out through Enoch now concerning the Great War. So he already knows that there's something going on in the worlds that's making people start to fight each other. And so he's like, well, for the past 10 years this has been going on. And then he sees the earth and sky, and unbeknownst to him, most likely, Infernos at that moment reached his heart and gave him this ambition. Or he already had the ambition because it's his personality, and the Infernos made the ambition grow more to the point where he'd actually want to build his military to conquer that whole world. He's very proud, as you will see. So, I don't know why I had this here, but just in case I needed it, I guess. Alright, now this is the map of, this is a cutout of the map I drew of Enoch's that we need for important. This is the map we need for this moment. We don't even need to look at this part. So rift planes are broken up into provinces, what you would call continents or countries. Depends. Certain rift planes, it depends on the rift plane. Some rift planes, continents and countries that are on Earth are the equivalent of continents and countries that are on the planet Earth, or this world's planet Ardon. Are what you would call provinces and rift planes. They're not broken up the same. Anyway, so in the province of Ovesh, there's the capital of Ovesh, or at this time, the capital of the whole rift plane Enoch, because at this point in history, in the book of Nettza, there's no provinces yet, so Ovesh is not the name of this place yet, because people only live really here. So we have the kingdom of Nettza here, and this is spoiler alert. Then we have the elven capital of Enoch's, Gensher. And then here we have a giant river that separates them called the Ephraim River, or the River of Ephraim. And Ephraim is large enough that if you're standing on the coast of the bank here, and on this coast here, across here, you'd be able to from here, you'd be able to see the city of Nettza from this coast. And even from Gensher, if you're like high up in one of the higher buildings, and you're looking over here with like binoculars, you'd be able to make out the outline of the whole city. So that's how big that is. Now, moving on. Okay. So, I made these slides like a month or two ago. And I don't have a script, so I just have the book, and I have this. So I don't remember what I was thinking with my placement, but it doesn't matter, we'll get to it. So there came a day when King Ankazar had sent his messengers to the Rift Plain Enox to make a proposition for the kingdom of Nettza. So the kingdom of Nettza is very big, as it's the capital of this whole Rift Plain. So it's kind of like the Ultira of the Rift Plain Enox. So King Ankazar, for whatever reason, decides to send his messengers to the Rift Plain Enox. Also, this is something King Nettza says while he's building up his army. He says in his heart, if I have the strongest militia, then I will be the strongest king in Empyria. So the whole universe he wants to be. And all will bow before me. So already you see Nettza's heart is lifted up in vanity, but his pride will be his downfall. So there came a day when King Ankazar had sent his messengers to the Rift Plain Enox to make a proposition for the kingdom of Nettza. There, they scouted, they meaning the messengers, they scouted out the land, and they found only a large forest of tall trees. So where did they show up? They showed up around here, his messengers. They showed up through the Rift Gate that's in Gensher, and they see there's a huge forest of tall trees all around them, and Mahar, one of the messengers, now I can get to that. Mahar, one of the messengers, no, that's a little bit further. Oh, wait. Mahar, one of the messengers, led the way through the forest, and they came across an elven town. And Mahar said to the elves, we are officials from the palace of Ultira, sent by the king to give a message. What is the name of this place? And they said, you are in Gensher, the elven capital of Enox. Then Mahar asked the elf that spoke with him, have you a king or a queen? And the elf replied, we have no need for a leader, for we ourselves govern this city. Mahar and his fellow messengers were confused because King Ankazar had told them about the kingdom of Nettza. So they're confused because King Ankazar sent them to the Rift Gate, and they showed up around here, and they're looking around and they expected to be sent to Nettza. Since Nettza's a pretty big city, should have its own Rift Gate. Why did they show up in Gensher? Who knows? And the elves are like, we don't have a king or a queen, you're in the wrong place. This is the city of Gensher. And so they're confused. Then Mahar questioned the elf again, saying, we were sent to give a message from our king to the king of Nettza. Where is his kingdom? The elf said, far beyond the great river of Ephraim. You will see the city as you cross the river. You cannot miss it, for its tower reaches to the clouds. Similar to Ultira. Mahar and the messengers traded their silver coins for an elven ship, which they boarded to cross the river. So they crossed this river of Ephraim, and they reached the kingdom of Nettza, and they stopped by the gate. They stopped at the gates of the castle, and the Mahar said to the guards, we are of the royal palace of Ultira, sent by King Ankazar to deliver a message to your king. So the guards let them pass, and they came to the throne room, where King Nettza sat looking proudly into the skylight. And I lost my place. Okay. Your Highness, said Mahar, we are from the land of Ultira on Ardon, and our king has made a proposition to you. He wishes for your cooperation in joining forces with our army. He says together our armies can prevail in the midst of the war, and that we may even be able to stop the beast. Now, we reach this part now. Bowing, Mahar held out a scroll, which was to be signed by the king. But King Nettza rose from his throne, walked down the stairs, and took the scroll to rip it in half, saying, I will not sign your treaty under any circumstance. We are not allies, and we never will be. Tell your precious king that we will take down any kingdom that attempts to rise above me and my kingdom. I have spoken. His royal guards signaled, and Mahar and the messengers were forced out of the castle. Oof, not a good first impression on Ultira. This Nettza guy, is he? So King Ankazar's messengers returned to Ultira, and they revealed the torn scroll to him. And Ankazar was greatly afflicted, for he never thought a king could act in such a manner. He said, what madness is this? Is this what a man gets for humbling himself before another? If he says he will trample any kingdom other than his, then I shall be the first to show him how weak he truly is. I hereby declare war on the kingdom of Nettza. This war shall never end until their king is dead. Ooh, not great, is it? We're off to a great start with the Great War. King Ankazar took out another scroll, and he began to write another document. Instead of writing a peace agreement, this time he wrote a declaration of war. So, what was supposed to be an endeavor to make sure there's nothing wrong with him and the kingdom of Nettza, because he knows how big they're growing, that turned out to be, oh, this is going to be war. And of course, the beast, Infernos, is behind this. King Ankazar sent his messengers to Nettza once again. As the messengers were walking down the streets of the city, they were ambushed by Nettash's archers. Blah 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 blah. They were ambushed by Nettash's archers, who were hiding behind the bells on the top of a bell tower. To avoid causing concern in the hearts of his citizens, King Nettash himself went down to the city to inspect the bodies of the messengers. Under the robes of one of the men was the scroll with the seal of Volterra, and blood was splattered across it. Burn their bodies in the pit, and clean this scroll. I shall read it in the castle after I have bathed myself, ordered Netthash to his guards. So this is like, a second nail in the coffin, so to speak. Now, we're coming up to a point where I need to explain something about. Do I have it here? Yeah, I do. So I'm just going to read this. So a little bit later on, this takes place. King Ankazar, he still wants to make sure of this peace. He's still trying to seek peace. He already said the king will surely die, but then he kind of comes to his senses, you could say. He's like, let's try peace one more time. So King Ankazar bought the ship for a temporary time. We're talking about a ship called the Solar Phantom, which I am about to talk about. King Ankazar bought the ship for a temporary time to meet with King Netthash in it, because Ankazar knew he would be ambushed if he visited Nettza. So instead of visiting Nettza, he chooses to rent a big airship in Aresta, in the space of the Rift Plains, to meet with King Netthash on it there instead. Each of them brought their army on the ship, and the two armies faced each other while the king sat down. They held the meeting in the core deck of the ship, where there was a large dining table. A core deck means in the center of the ship, as I will show you. But why do they need to meet together on an airship in space? Basically, King Ankazar is thinking, I'm not going to invite them to my kingdom, in case there's a war that breaks out in my kingdom from the meeting. And I'm not going to meet him in Nettza, because, as the text says, he feels like he'd be ambushed because of what just happened. And so instead, he also doesn't want to meet in any other place, because if he goes to the kingdom of Thasher, for example, the capital of Granera on Ardon, that's not that kingdom's business, and there might also break out a war there or a battle there, and King Ankazar doesn't want that. So King Ankazar chose specifically for a good reason to rent this airship that's very renowned at this time in history. Or it's kind of like the Titanic, you could say, for this time in history. So what is this ship? It's called the Solar Phantom. The Solar Phantom was such a big deal at this time. Its construction was actually begun 200 years before the Great War began, so it had a huge reputation. It was built on the rift plain Eltia and quickly became extremely famous across the worlds because of its size and its ability to fly in Aresta for the time. This was the only ship that could do this, hence its great fame. Think of it like the Titanic, okay? And like I said, in this time in history, the space in Aresta, there was never built any airship that can fly there yet. So, though it is not mentioned in the Book of Nettza, the fall of the Solar Phantom was a massive shock to most of the worlds, and it was something that made nations realize the Great War was going to be getting worse. So, think about the Solar Phantom like little kids who hear about it from their mothers or fathers, their parents. They hear about this, and they know about the Solar Phantom. They say, "Oh, Mom, Dad, I want to. Can we go on the Solar Phantom? That'll be so fun." And the parents would be like, "No, we don't have money for that, and we're too far away from the closest town with a rift gate, and rift gates by themselves are expensive enough. So no, thank you." And so, basically, the Solar Phantom has, and I'm going to show you. So this is a sketch I made of the Solar Phantom flying through the currents of the space of Aresta, where the rift plane portals are. but where the portals that lead to the rift planes are, that hang like stars, and the front rift crystal is opening up a portal to Ovissa, where the Earth is, Ardon, and the stars, and there's the moon. The letters are just, I was going to color it, but then I never did. I drew this in 11th grade in high school, so around 2017, 2018. Crazy. But this is the solar phantom. This is the big cockpit, huge window. You can walk in here. So for scale, these are the massive windows of the dining hall. So this is the core deck of the ship. Inside here is where the dining hall is, where this meeting takes place. Of course, as you can already tell, the solar phantom does fall, and you will find out why soon. So the solar phantom here has sails that are the shape of wings. They're red, and it's mostly bronze and gold colored, the ship. And yeah, like red wings, and it's got white outlines like iron kind of, or steel, and it looks kind of, it's not steampunkish, it's not steampunk, but it looks like a medieval giant ship, but it's flying because it has wing-shaped sails. And this is a giant arc-light crystal and a rift crystal in the front, an arc-light crystal in the back. This helps it move forward, and there's also these fans that help it propel forward as well. Now, the space in Aresta is breathable, and so the space in Ovissa is like our outer space. You can't breathe there. So airships cannot fly in the space of Aresta. But that's why the Solar Phantom is closed in. There's no outer deck on the Solar Phantom in case it wants to go to Ovissa. So there are two ways one could board the Solar Phantom. It rarely ever docked anywhere in an airship, in an aerodrome, anywhere. The only places it would go is the aerodrome in Ultira, very rarely, but most of the time people would board the ship by paying some kind of fee that's very expensive to rent it out. Well, not rent out the whole ship. That's what King Ankazar did. That's not normal, by the way, but he's a king, he's rich, he can rent out the whole entire ship. But usually think of it like a cruise ship. People have to pay their ticket to reserve a spot on it in one of these rooms in here where they could stay. And there's also stuff under the ship for people to do, and this is like the main hub area. But they would go on the ship through the rift gate. So they go to a rift gate in a town that has a connection to the Solar Phantom. They pay the toll for the rift gate plus the ticket for reserving a spot on the Solar Phantom, plus the price that it takes to even go on the Solar Phantom. So it's very expensive. Mostly only really high-end people would go on the Solar Phantom. So the Solar Phantom is the Titanic of the Age of Peace going into the Great War. And yeah, there you go. That should give you a good image of the Solar Phantom. But it's only mentioned in like a paragraph or two in the Book of Nettza. And that's it. For the entire Legendary Scrolls. That's it. Yeah, here in the dining hall, there are the two rift gates on either side. The rift portals that lead to... So the most common way people would board the Solar Phantom, since it rarely docked anywhere, was to go through Riftgate. But if it did dock, you could also board it then. But usually if it did, it was for a very specific purpose, not open to the public when it docked at an aerodrome or an air dock. There are air docks, which are think of it like a port for airships, but they have to be built off of a mountain or a high cliff, but they're less common. Most places that airships land are aerodromes, because aerodromes can be built on flat land. So now in the case of the Book of Nettza, King Ankazar, we aren't told how he boarded the ship, but he most likely boarded it with his army in the aerodrome of Ultira, having the Solar Phantom rented for himself and the army of Nettza, and then boarded it in the aerodrome of Ultira, this aerodrome here. But it's also possible he used the rift gate in the palace to get inside of it too, while it's flying in the space of Aresta. Either is possible. We don't know. I mean, I wrote it, but I don't want everything to be known. If it's not in the text, can't know. So, that's the Solar Phantom airship. Okay, now, I don't have it on the screen here, so I'll have to read it from the book to explain how does the Solar Phantom, what happens now that these two armies are meeting for a potential peace treaty. Now, I'm going to read the account of the Solar Phantom. During this time of the Great War, there was a large airship built for the purpose of sailing through the currents of the space of Arvesta. The ship was called the Solar Phantom, and it was used for traversing Arvesta to reach different rift planes. King Ankazar bought the ship for a temporary time to meet with King Nethash in it, and that's... Okay, now we're caught up. Extending the treaty to Nethash in the ship. Extending the treaty to Nethash, King Ankazar said, King Nethash of Nettza, please accept my offer. I will not start this war if you sign this treaty, but I will instead give you and your kingdom many riches. I would rather our nations not endure the calamities of war. And King Nethash responded. How do we think he's going to respond? Good or bad? I wonder. King Nethash responded, I do not need your riches, for my kingdom rests above the greatest reservoir of precious stones and crystals on Enox. Keep your platinum and your gold and silver. Nevertheless, I accept your offer. May there be peace between our kingdoms, and I may even allow diplomatic relations. Now, while King Nethash was signing the treaty, a group of assassins in his army climbed to the ceiling of the core deck, and they readied their crossbows and knives where the kings were sitting. Each of them where the kings were sitting, each of them had their army behind their backs, and their aeons were positioned in the front lines. I hope our countries get along well, Nethash said, as he finished signing the treaty. King Ankazar took the paper and stamped his seal on the scroll, saying, Thank you for your cooperation, King Nethash. And both of them stood to their feet, their armies still facing each other. And as King Ankazar began walking toward his room in the ship, an arrow shot down, and one of the soldiers in his army fell. Immediately King Nethash was gone, and had left through the rift gate to his castle. And King Ankazar shouted to his army, Then this is war. Do not hold back. Wipe out every last one of them. So, now the two armies begin fighting each other within the core deck of the ship, and even breaking into other decks of the ship and rooms and everything, layers of the ship. And they're blasting through it with blaze arc light, like fire magic, and fighting, killing each other, maiming each other. And the battles in the Solar Phantom takes up the whole ship to the point where the arclight crystal starts to fail, causing everything that powers the ship to fail. And the sails are really for aesthetic purposes, but they do serve a little bit of purpose. But with the arclight crystal failing, the entire ship starts to kind of blow up and go out into space and become nothing, basically. So it falls. So that's what happens to the Solar Phantom. Solar Phantom's gone, it falls, and it's a big deal in history. And because of that, King Ankazar now officially declares that they will be at full war with the Kingdom of Nettza and King Nethash specifically. So, after this whole fiasco with the Solar Phantom, King Nethash hired 11 more generals to work alongside General Near. General Near was originally the only military general in the Kingdom of Volterra from the start of the Great War. But now he's hired more. So there were 12 generals who had authority over the 21,000 soldiers of the Volterran army. The 12 generals were Near, Joktan, Harris, Shirk, Torn, Icon, Sephim, Wilhelm, Aniris, Dekor, Yatar, and Opus. Each general was given authority over about 1,750 troops. Now, the 12 generals took their armies with them, and each of them went out through the gates of the city. General Near and General Shirk's armies came out of the south gates, and General Opus and General Wilhelm's armies came out the north gates. The rest of the generals, with their armies, stood behind the east and west gates, awaiting the command to march out to the Volterran fields. I think I was supposed to read more between this. So what leads to this point? King Ankazar hires these generals to make his army even bigger, because... Oh, my throat is killing me. I'm not made for this kind of stuff. While King Ankazar was preparing his armies, King Nethash was already on the move. The Nettza army had already arrived on Ardon through the Rift Gate in the city of Thasher, and Nettzash sent his troops to camp in the valleys of the mountains of Granera. The next day, so like as soon as this solar phantom fell, Nettza's already going straight to Ultira to attack them. The next day, King Ankazar looked out his window to see the sunrise. In the distance, sorry, I keep losing my place. Boy, I lose my place so easily. The next day, King Ankazar looked out his window to see the sunrise. In the distance, there was approaching a large army, and the multitude of troops began to block out the sun as they marched over the hills in the south. Seeing this, and knowing it was the Nettza army, Ankazar ordered his guards to sound the trumpets. The guards grabbed large trumpets, and they went to the tops of the palace towers to blow them. The whole city heard the sound of the trumpets, and the people began to panic. Let's see. Okay. Good. It's all good. So this, it should have been this, and then this, and then this. So King Ankazar said to his guards, "Go into the city to comfort the people. Hide the women and children in their homes, and do not let them come out. Gather all the peasants of the streets to take shelter in the palace basement." So the guards took shields and went to the streets of the city to bring order to the chaos. And eventually the streets were emptied, and King Ankazar gave the order for battle to the 12 generals. The 12 generals then took their armies, and that's when these generals all split up to each of the 4 gates. Now, this is supposed to be King Nettzash and his army going down a valley to, instead of there being a mountain here or anything, I think Stable Diffusion thought this was supposed to be my city of Ultira, but no. Ultira is a giant city with 4 big walls and a giant palace in the center that reaches the clouds. And the city is in the middle of a huge open flat plain that's encircled by mountains from the sides, and it's flat in the middle. So this is not 100% accurate. Also, the sun would not be there. Okay. So, the soldiers begin to block out the sun. And they're coming up to the south gate. Now, I need to yawn for a bit. Okay. The Nettza army approaches from here. I drew this a while ago, so give me a bit of time sometimes to think. Sometimes I don't know what I meant by some symbols, but basically the Nettza army comes in from the south and approaches big numbers, and we have General Nir and General Shirk leading their parts of the Ultiran army here. And after that, battles take place. This represents battles, as I recall. And then eventually, Alpus and Wilhelm come in with their Aeons. So these are so Alpus's army has Aeons who use blaze, like fire, basically. Wilhelm's army has Aeons that use plasma, like lightning, you could say. And then there's Alfar Aeons, which is a synthetic, like an alchemic arclight element, meaning it's a mix. And then Shirk has Aeons that can use mist arclight, which is like the silver. I mean, I said it in the book Workings of Syntha for Book 3. You can go back if you need to know. And Nettza Aeons have all this stuff, including Quake, which means they can shake the ground with arclight. And it's a heavy battle. I mean, it's a gruesome battle. And eventually, the rest of the generals come to aid these ones who have been on the field already. And then Nettza pulls out their trump card, you could say, their catapults. And their Aeons use their conduit staffs. And a conduit staff is, at this time in history, and for most of the legendary scrolls, not in modern times, but in the scrolls, conduit staff is a common staff. It's a weapon that doesn't have a blade or anything. That has a little like orb at its tip that Aeons can use the staff to what's the word? What's the phrase? What's the term? They can use to conduct. Yeah, they can use to conduct a lot of arclight energy from their soul through their body and out of their body into the staff and the orb at the end of the staff to heighten and hone in certain arclight powers. So it's basically like an Aeon's weapon, you could say, because they're not just going to go out there flailing their fingers and hands around and look silly. They're using staffs. Anyway, so the Aeons use their conduit staffs with blaze arc light and plasma to set their giant rocks on fire and throw them with catapults. So their catapults on fire. It's a big gruesome battle. Now Nettza wipes out 3 of the generals, as you can see, with just Shirk remaining. And then Nettza splits off into 2 sides to go east and west, and then Nettza army positions itself here, and then the 4 generals on either side continue to fight like that. And then, after General Yatar and his army is wiped out, and then this army wipes out this part of the Nettza army, these generals come to aid the remaining Ultiran army, and they kind of like encircle and corner Nettza so they can't go in. But then the Nettza army defeats Dekor's army, so they are getting attacked here. Then they defeat him and they go inside from there, and then the Nettza army starts ransacking through Ultira, the main street, and like really terrifying people, and setting stuff on fire, buildings on fire, destroying homes, and important buildings and stuff. And some of the Ultiran army that are still in the kingdom itself start trying to attack and defend citizens. So now the battle culminates here. The special force. Yeah, I need to introduce the special force from my book, I guess. So I gotta get to the place. Okay. Just a little bit longer. Sorry. Okay. While battles were occurring on the edges of the city, King Ankazar returned to the palace. In the throne room, Ankazar called forth the special force. This was a secret miniature army which he had been forming during the time the Ultiran army first formed. The special force consisted of 20 extremely skilled Aeons, who were all descendants of Draxivan, from Book 2. Once Ankazar called them, they all came out from the hidden chamber, which was behind the wall of the throne. And King Ankazar said unto them, 7 of our generals have fallen with their armies. Now is the time for you to reveal your power to this kingdom. 10 of you go out to the fields and wipe out every last one of the soldiers in their army. The rest of you go to the west side of the city wall to aid the remaining troops of our army. Be quick and efficient, for I do not wish for this battle to go on any longer. So 10 of the Aeons went out into the city, and 10 went out to the Ultiran fields. Now, the special force reached the west side of the city, and they aided General Sephim and Aniris' armies. They left no trace of the Nettza army, whereas they had previously been riding in the streets. The other 10 Aeons reached the Ultiran fields, and they ambushed the remaining soldiers of the Nettza army. And the people who were inside and on top of the city walls saw the great explosions which came from the Aeon's arclight in the field. Pillars of fire and smoke arose in the distance, and not a single Nettza soldier remained. And the watchers on the city walls said, By the heavens, what kind of Aeons could possess such power? So you can probably imagine it, but these Aeons are so powerful, their arclight energy is powerful enough to generate entire, like, tornadoes, you could say, pillars of fire and smoke, as the writer would call it. They didn't have a word for tornadoes, but they mix, like, wind and fire, completely destroyed and blew up all the remaining Nettza soldiers. The next morning, before that, the Ultiran army saw that the Nettza army was destroyed, and they began to rejoice over their victory. They were perplexed by what had just happened, yet they were joyful that the battle was won. And soon the word went out to all the citizens of the kingdom that the battle was over, and they were free to walk the streets again. And King Ankazar decides to strengthen his militia again, because he sees the army was weakened a lot from that battle. But the next morning, after the battle, Ankazar was taking a walk in the palace garden, and he came to speak with me, one of his servants. So we see that this book was written by a person in the world, obviously, like all the books, but it turns to first person because now you're seeing that this wasn't just some historian disconnected from the events just writing about it from a distant past perspective. No, this is written from somebody who lived in the kingdom. So, I, Jessan, was a scribe who recorded Ultira's history from the time of my youth, and this was the reason I was hired. King Ankazar sat by me in the garden, saying, Jessan, my friend, I come to you with a request. I ask that you record the events of this war from here on out, so that my descendants will see that I was victorious in this war. Now you could say Ankazar is kind of proud like Nettza too, but not in a bad way, I guess. This was when I began to write these things, for I was there since the beginning of Ankazar's rule, and I had been watching and recording everything that took place, to show how good of a king he was. So, as you can tell, this whole book, the Book of Nettza, is written by Jessan. So now we have the name of the author. Jessan, he is a court scribe, you might say. He is a well-renowned servant of the royal house of Ultira, of the Fraser family, and has been a scribe in Ultira since he was young. So he knows a lot about Ultiran history. He knows how to record history well, and how to gather eyewitness testimonies and make sure all the history of Ultira is accurate and down to the details as much as possible. Hence how this book is written. Now, moving on. So after the first battle, as we just went through, the elves from Ahana, I forgot to explain something that might be confusing. The army approaching Ultira, it said that it blocked out the sun. That's because of the mountains over here. Sorry, the mountains over here and the mountains over here already kind of block out the sun. So when the sun is rising, the sunlight, like if you're in the King of Ultira because of the geography, and you're looking out this way from, so you know, King Ankazar saw the army blocking out the sun coming from the south, but of course the sun doesn't rise in the south. So the mountains blocked the sun halfway at this point in the sun rising, but at the same time we have the Nettza army, and the Nettza army was so big, and it's coming from like kind of all these sides here. Like it is coming mainly from here. This is the front where like King Nettza sent them forward from the front, but they also came in this way like that. And because they're so big, they're coming over the valleys and the mountains too. And as I didn't draw it, but if you're looking into the distance and the mountains are so high that the sunrise is halfway above the tops of the mountains, and you see a valley in those mountains, the army is so big that when the army is coming over that part of the mountains where the sun is rising from, it's kind of blocking out the sun. Moving on. So that explains that. Alright, now after the first battle, the elves from Ahana send a letter to King Ankazar stating their new proposal to aid Ultira in their battles. So King Ankazar receives a letter from the elves from Ahana, which is this capital city of Ivanhara. And when he sees it, he says, by the heavens, that the elves would offer their hand in this war from so far away. Truly I am grateful to them. By no means shall we now be able to lose this war. So King Ankazar stamped his seal on the scroll's case, and he sent it by airship back to the city of Ahana. Now, this is a big deal to King Ankazar because of the elves. The elves are... I mean, I'd need like a whole video to explain the elves and what they're like on its own, but basically, to summarize what's needed to know for context here, the elves are very powerful military. They're not very prone to war, but even though they're not prone to war, their wisdom and their meticulous nature, like their nature is to be really meticulous and highly detailed and intricate, and all their designs for everything, for buildings, infrastructure, military too, everything, and even studying and knowledge and how they do schooling. They're very, typical elven kind of thing in most fantasy worlds and stuff. But they have such a strong military that one of the reasons why at this time there's been no thought of the Great War having an effect on them is because of the nature of the military. And they already built a huge military even before Ultira started building it. They kind of started almost preemptively when the Great War started, and they did it really fast. So they have a reputation at this time in history of power and wisdom, might, and but also humility, but also dignity and honor, they're this you don't want to mess with the elves because one, most people respect them, they don't have anything wrong with them, and two, even if they did, they there would just be it'd just be a death sentence to come at them. Yeah, come at me, bro. Yeah, don't come at the elves. So for the elves to send a letter saying that they side with King Ankazar and Ultira and want to help them defeat Nettza says something about how the elves view Ultira, and it says a lot about how uh, Nettza is viewed by the elves. Like if you think of Nettza and King Nettza, she's the antithesis to the elven race as a whole, and how like their whole spirit as a people, versus the Humes. So like, the elves kind of see Nettach as the king of the worst. He's like the caricature of the worst Hume of the Humes. The Hume is what all the other like races call the main race of humanity, Humes, and so there's some context for that. That's why King Ankazar is like, well, by the heavens, that the elves would offer their hand in this war from so far away, and the elves, we're gonna win now. He gets really confident, like we're gonna win now because the elves are on our side. So, and the name of the army of the capital of Evenhara, the land of the elves, you could call it Ahana City. The name of the army of Ahana City is the F-Fest army. So, King Nettach now got very angry after his first defeat. This led him to seek alliances with the Vienna, who lived in the land of Emek. Right here. This is Emek, okay? Don't forget. Why did I laugh? But when he went to one of their villages, they immediately rejected him, saying that their, quote, holy wood would not heed him. So he turned away from the village and ordered his Aeons to burn down the entire village by setting the trunks of the tall trees that supported it ablaze. Yeah, I mean, there you go. That's what happens. And for time's sake, I need to kind of get past this. But basically, King Nettach hates that his army fell, and in that first battle, and so he tries to recruit and get allyship with the Vienna armies. But that's not going to happen. Now, word reached the land of Evenhara that the Vienna were attacked by the Nettza army. I mean, they burnt down one of their whole entire villages because it's like built in the trees, in the top of the trees, and they burnt the entire trees down that all supported the village with arclight. But word reached the land of Evenhara that the Vienna were attacked by the Nettza army, and the F-Est army of the city of Ahana began to seek vengeance. For the leading general of the F-Est army, Javarith, said, "Any enemy of Ultira is an enemy of ours, and let us not turn aside from the tragedy that has befallen our Vienna sisters, for that would be a disgrace." Receiving word of this, King Ankazar also was wroth. Ankazar gathered his army to plan an ambush. Dun dun dun. The king gathered all his servants and guardians in the throne room. He said unto them, "I am planning an attack on the kingdom of Nettza, and it will be on their own soil. For they have blasphemed the name of Ultira countless times now." Why does he say blaspheme like such a big deal? It's dramatic. Well, one, they're patriotic, for Ultira. Ultira has always been known as the biggest, greatest kingdom in all the worlds in Empyria. And, not to mention, now, it has the status of having the royal family that will lead to the prophecy of the Dawnstar, who will bring an end to the darkness. That's a pretty big deal. So he has a lot of pride in Ultira, too. So, for they have blasphemed the name of Ultira countless times now. Behold, I have given each of you a very high rank in my kingdom, and you will now exercise that power. I am sending each of you to a designated post at the edges of the city of Nettza. Do not fear, for I am going with you, and I will bring the entire Ultiran army, that the armies of Nettza will not prevail. Now, King Ankazar is a pretty big guy. He's like a very muscular, wide frame, very tall too, and he has like long blonde hair and a long blonde beard. He's like a warrior king, you could say, and his whole vibe. So he's gonna join his own army to help them in the battle too. He's not afraid to go into the battle. So the elves of the F-Est army have also joined forces with us, and they will be the key to our victory. We embark to Enox this evening, therefore brace yourselves. So now we're finally at the point where we're about to go into the final battle of the Book of Nettza. Let me skip down a few pages here in my book. Okay. Now, this is going to be a little long, but it's alright. I'm just going to read it. Para reached the entrance of the castle. Now, who's Para? Para, let me read a little bit earlier on before this. No spoilers. Okay. Once the members of the palace had left the throne room, from this point, once they left the throne room, King Ankazar pulled aside his most trusted servant, whose name was Para, and he said to her, I have chosen you, my most trustworthy servant, to accomplish the most difficult task of this battle. Take 900 gold from the treasury and adorn yourself with the most beautiful apparel that can be found in the palace. Then approach the gates of the castle of Nettza, and bribe the guards to allow you to have dinner with their king. You shall persuade him to give a toast with you, making him think that you are toasting to his royalty. And I have given you a deadly poison. Fill his cup with the poison. The king of Nettza shall die tonight. So that's the context. Now we can go on. Para reached the entrance of the castle, and 4 tall guards stood in the way. And Para said, I have many riches to share with the king in his chamber. I have also come to have a toast with your king personally. Then the guard said, Our king needs no more riches, for he is already the richest king in all the worlds, even though Ankazar technically is, but whatever. Then Para split 10 pieces of gold among them. The guards granted her access into the castle. So, very, very plainly stated, but basically, yeah. They're like, no, we don't need money. He's already king. He's the richest king of all the worlds. Don't come in. And then Para splits 10 pieces of gold to each of them, and they're like, oh, okay, you can come in. It's alright. They love money. Para entered the throne room, where King Nettza was staring into the skylight. So this is the second time we see him in his throne room, staring into the skylight. Earlier before the battle started, and now after the battles, and before the last battle. Who is this? Nettza said. And he's looking up, by the way, at this point still. So he's very proud. Para, kneeling before the throne, said, My lord, the rumors are true. You are indeed very pleasing to lay eyes on. If you had a queen, any woman would envy her. Then Nettza looked down to see the woman who spoke with him. So see that? I don't know if you noticed that there, but it's like he's looking up at the skylight, so proud. And then when he looks down, it's only when he hears somebody, feeding his ego, you could say. And Nettza said, If I had a queen, she would be dressed in marvelous clothing such as yours. What is it you have come into my castle to tell me? Para held up the bag of powder given to her by Ankazar, and she shook her money bag. See what I got. And she said, Here, see, I have many pieces of gold in this pouch, 890 pieces to be exact, and I have brought this seasoning to drink with you. Now Nettza was interested in what Para had to say, so he rose from his throne and walked down the stairs. Come with me, I will show you to my dining hall. Para had expected him to ask where she was from, but he did not, so she was confident now that she could fulfill her task. Nettza sought to make Para his queen, thus he chose to be gracious to her. So Nettza is very vain, as you can see. He likes money. You got enough money, you can give me the money, and then I'll be happy, and it's okay. And if you got a beautiful woman, then I'll marry you, and that's good. So he's very vain, very outward appearance focused. That's the problem with Nettza. Nettza and Para sat across from each other in the castle's dining hall. Tell me your name, mysterious woman, Nettza said. And Para replied, I am Para, my lord. Then Para took the bag of powder, poured some in each goblet, and mixed the poison with Nettza's cup. However, she had poured more into Nettza's goblet than her own, so that she would not die with him. Obviously, you don't want that to happen. Defeats the purpose. Then Nettza said, although given Para's loyalty to Ultira and the royal family, she would be willing to die for Ultira in this case. Anyway, then Nettza said, To me and my kingdom, and to the future of Nettza, the greatest kingdom in all of creation. Right there. Yeah, right, buddy. And touching Para's goblet with his, they both drank. Then King Nettza's eyes rolled into their sockets, and his face fell upon the table. So King Nettza of Nettza died that night. And as Jeshan wrote that, I'm pretty sure he was grinning ear to ear, like, that's right, this is when Nettza was defeated, technically, at the heart. The head of the serpent was cut off here. After this, Para made her way out of the dining hall, but the king's guards smelled the scent of their king's body. So they knew what Para had done. As Para walked down the halls of the castle, the servants of Nettza came and surrounded her with halberds and staffs. A halberd is like a staff, but with an axe-shaped blade at the end of it, kind of. "Is there a problem, sirs?" Para said. And they said, "You have assassinated our king." "What brings you to this conclusion?" Para replied. "Our aeons could smell the scent of death coming from his private chamber," they replied. And Para replied, "Truly you are mistaken. I gave a toast to him, to the prosperity of his kingdom. Then he dropped dead. I assure you that I do not know what caused him to faint." And her words swayed the hearts of the guards. Not just her words, but her appearance. Then they said, "Show us the body of our beloved king." So Para brought the guards into the room she had come out of. And as they entered to gather around Nettza's corpse on the table, Para closed and locked the doors behind them. Para heard the guards weeping over their dead king, and she placed her hands on the engravings of the doors. Then she sent a surge of arclight energy through the doors, and she set off an explosion in the chamber. So they're gone. Now Para escaped the castle and returned to the outside of the city walls, where the Ulterian armies were waiting to strike. So Para had gone in first, ahead of the army, before they were going to reveal themselves and ambush the city. Now the king is dead, and now they're going to destroy the rest of the military. Now, the battle ensues, and the Nettza army is completely being defeated, 100%. And then the elves are also part of the battle, so they're helping the Ulterian army already. So Nettza stands no chance. So their king dead, and the elven army with Ulterian army, they're just gone. And it reaches this point in the battle near the end. While the elves attacked their sides of the castle, the Ulterian armies stormed the southern and eastern sides of the castle. Aeons, archers, swordsmen, and arbalists. An arbalist is an archer but with a crossbow user. And arbalists all charged into the front gates of the castle, wiping out every man they saw. Not a single soldier was given a chance to attack as the Ulterian armies invaded the remaining sections of the castle. Then, after they had finished taking out all the castle soldiers, the Ulterian and Ephes Aeons circled around the foundation of the castle tower, which was in the center of the castle behind the throne room, similar to Ultira. You can kind of see a pattern with Nettza trying to copy Ultira and be better, yada yada. The Aeons lifted their hands and looked up at the top of the tower. Then, all at once, they summoned Quake Arclight, which broke the entire tower into countless pieces of rubble. When it falls down, all as a heap of rubble. And the tower fell straight down as if it had never been built. Now, this is stated very historically and matter-of-factly, but this event, similar to the Solar Phantom event, was a huge, think of like the towers in 9/11, right? Like, everyone who was near there, it was so big, it was so terrifying, it was so massive of a scale of a thing to happen. It got the attention of the whole world. It's crazy, so big, for something so amazing to be brought down like that, and it's all dust. Similar kind of vibe, what happened here. And I mention that because it's quoted later on in Book 6 by an elf who witnessed this from across the river. So even across the Euphrates River in Gensur City, elves saw when the castle tower fell down, and they knew it was the Ulterian army, and they rejoiced. So the kingdom of Nettza is now fallen. After the city of Nettza was destroyed by Ultira, King Ankazar had Para go home. That's a typo. It's all right. King Ankazar had Para go home. King Ankazar had Para go home to Ultira to rest for her great work, and then the old victorious Ultira army celebrates over the ruins of Nettza with drinking and dancing and singing. So it's all happy-go-lucky now. It's still in the Great War, and this is only the beginning phases of the Great War. But I mean, as you saw from the timeline, the Great War will last 2,020 years. But moving on. Ankazar officially declares and decrees for a new city to be built over the ruins of Nettza after the rubble is cleared, and this new city will be called Neveri. I don't know why that's copied, but so that's basically the end of the book. And let me read how the book 5 ends. Basically, sorry, King Ankazar gives to each of the leading soldiers of his army a medallion attached to a necklace, which would be a symbol of their stewardship alongside the king meaning so King Ankazar. So King Ankazar wants to build this new city called Neveri over Nettza, and when he builds the city of Neveri, it's like a sister city to Ultira. It's like if you picture one kingdom breaks part of itself off to another local area, but then that becomes its own separate identity of a city, but it still was originally part of the bigger city, and it's still under the ultimate governance of that other city, ultimately. That's I don't know if that is a term or anything. I should probably figure that out sooner rather than later if it does have a term. But that's what Neveri is to Ultira. So King Ankazar sends his most loyal servants and of his armies, leading the soldiers of his army, his most loyal servants. His most loyal servants who are leaders in the army of Ultira. There we go, I got it. And he sends them to rule over Neveri as its governors with medallions to be like a physical reminder of their victory in the battle with Nettza and King Ankazar being proud of them, and also as a physical reminder and sign of their rulership over Neveri. So, and it says this, and King Ankazar gave to each of the leading soldiers of his army a medallion attached to a necklace, which would be a symbol of their stewardship alongside the king. So they're not kings, they're stewards or governors over Neveri. He gave the medallions to 9 warriors who fought valiantly in the battle. The first 3 were swordsmen, and they were given the medallion of war. These were their names, Gesh, Hephta, and Taurus. The next 3 were archers, and they were given the medallion of wisdom. Their names were Ejaph, Varius, and Dioram. The last 3 were Aeons, and they were given the medallion of power. The 3 Aeons were Alion, Laish, and Kistis. The medallion of war gives the authority to govern the military. The medallion of wisdom gives the authority to judge the people and make decisions. The medallion of power gives the authority to rule over the other medallions. So the 3 Aeons, Alion, Laish, and Kistis, are like the rulers over the rulers of Neveri. So the city of Neveri was to be under the authority of these 9 warriors. And then, of course, we have Ejaph, Varius, and Dioram, with the medallions of wisdom, who are archers in the battle. They become, judges and make decisions, meaning lawmakers, okay? And Gesh, Hephta, and Taurus, the 3 swordsmen who were given the medallion of war, they become the military leaders for Neveri, right? And then the 3 Aeons are the big 3. So, the city of Neveri was to be under the authority of these 9 warriors. Now 3 years had passed, and the city of Neveri was finished being built. So they built the city in 3 years. Of course, it'd be built on more after that, but, officially finished for now. The city was governed by the 9 warriors, Gesh, Hephta, Taurus, Ejaph, Varius, Dioram, Alion, Laish, and Kistis. In the course of time, many of the soldiers who had also fought in the battles came to live in the city. And so the city of Neveri grew in population over time. Now, after Neveri was finished being built, Ankazar and Holly became one flesh. Well, this implies that for their whole marriage, up to before defeating Nettza and having the kingdom of Neveri established as a city and finished 5 years later, up until that point, they never, did the marriage thing, if you know what I mean. I don't want to be crass, so I won't say the word. But, after Neveri is finished being built, Ankazar and Holly, now they become one flesh for the first time. And Holly conceived a male child. The next month, Holly gave birth to their son. So that shows that in my world, it's not a 9-month cycle. It's usually about a 1-month cycle. Usually a 1-month pregnancy. And it's not as painful either. The next month, Holly gave birth to their son. And she named him Calvis. Dun dun dun. That's the name of the next book. Book 6, The Fall of Calvis. So we know who's going to be the next main character. Well, really the first legit main character in any of the books so far. But moving on. He is to be the next king of Ultira. And this is Jessan writing to close the book of Nettza. So by the time Jessan wrote this, Calvis was a newborn. And now he's writing in the present tense. So Jessan writes this in the present tense after Calvis has been born. And the kingdom of Neveri has been established. Nettza's a thing of the past now, and Netthash has been dead for years. Jessan writes this to close the book of Nettza. He is to be referring to Calvus, the next king of Volterra, and he will pass these stories down his generations, so that the goodness of his father will never be forgotten. Let this book remind the people of Volterra of their great king, who was humble and who delivered them from the evil kingdom of Nettza in wisdom and power. I am Jessan, and I have written these things based on what I've seen and heard. Now I end this account. And there we have it. That's the end of the Book of Nettza. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I haven't 100% figured out how I'm going to structure these, but this was just a test, But it's also the official video for the Book of Nettza, so there you go. And maybe going forward, I might have more structure. Maybe I might start making scripts for these, but it just takes a lot of work. But I can do it probably. It would be better than just kind of having my book open in my phone and then also this at the same time. But I want to make sure next time it's more structured, more coherent in its structure and order and stuff, and so it's more easily followable. So you can more easily follow it, especially for the next book, Book 6, which will be broken up into multiple parts given its length, and Book 6 will be more narrative focused, and we're going to get into the life of Calvus, the son of King Anxar, and everything his story has to offer. Well, that's Empyria Lecture Series number 5, Book 5 of Legendary Scrolls, the Book of Nettza. See you next time in Part 1 of Book 6, The Fall of Calvus.